There are 7 major covenants that span the entire Bible. By the time you reach Revelation, every single one of them has either been fulfilled or is in the process of being fulfilled. But all 7, every promise, every sealed agreement, every binding oath between God and humanity, finds its unshakable cornerstone in a single book, Genesis. Most people read Genesis and see a collection of stories, a garden, a flood, a man called out of Ur. But Genesis is not a collection of stories. It is a blueprint. And every covenant in the Bible is built on what gets laid in these 50 chapters. This video is an overview. We are not going deep into any one covenant today. What we are doing is standing back far enough to see the architecture, to see what God was actually building across 4,000 years of history. And at the end of every section, I am going to leave you with one question. A question that only the dedicated video in the series can answer. First, a brief definition. Because most people think of a covenant like a contract. 2 parties, mutual obligations, enforceable terms. A covenant is not a contract. A contract governs a transaction. A covenant creates a relationship. When a covenant is made in the ancient Near Eastern world, the parties do not just agree to terms. They bind themselves to one another. And the mechanism of a covenant, the way it is sealed, is almost always blood. An animal is cut. The parties walk through the pieces. The meaning is, if I break this, let what happened to this animal happen to me. That detail matters. Because one of the strangest moments in all of Genesis is when God makes a covenant with Abraham, and only God walks through the pieces. Here is how to understand the structure of what follows. These 7 covenants are not separate agreements that replace each other. They are layers of the same building. Each one presupposes the one before it. Each one adds something the previous covenant could not yet say. When you understand the architecture, you stop reading the Bible as a collection of disconnected events and start reading it as a single, coherent project that never deviated from its original aim. 7 covenants, 1 builder, 1 structure that was never improvised and never abandoned. The first covenant is never explicitly called a covenant in the text. Genesis 1 and 2 describe God creating, placing humanity in a garden, giving them work, rest, and relationship, and setting one boundary, the tree. In the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Theologians call this the Edenic covenant, the covenant of works. And here is the question that video 1 will answer. If this was a covenant, why does the New Testament describe Jesus as the second Adam who succeeds where the first Adam failed? What does that tell us about what Adam was actually built to do? The second covenant is spoken in the middle of a curse. Genesis 3:15. God addresses the serpent. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. This is the first promise of redemption in Scripture. Theologians call it the proto-evangelium, the first gospel. It is spoken inside a judgment. The most hopeful sentence in the chapter is buried in the curse. The question that video 2 will answer: how can the most hopeful promise in the book appear in the same breath as the most devastating judgment? And who exactly is the offspring God is pointing toward? The third covenant follows the flood. Genesis 9. God makes a covenant with Noah, and with every living creature, and with the earth itself. Never again. The rainbow is the sign. What is strange about this covenant is its scope. It does not apply only to Israel. It applies to every human being and every living thing. A universal covenant. The question that video 3 will answer: God says in Genesis 8:21 that the human heart is still evil after the flood, before he makes the promise. So why does he promise never to judge it the same way again, before anything has changed? The fourth covenant is with Abraham, and it comes in stages. Genesis 12. Leave, and I will make you a great nation, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Genesis 15. A formal covenant, sealed with a strange and disturbing ritual. Genesis 17. Circumcision as the sign. Genesis 22. An oath, sworn at the edge of a sacrifice. 3 promises: land, descendants, blessing for all nations. And in Genesis 15, God puts Abraham to sleep and walks through the pieces alone. The question that video 4 will answer: why did God walk through alone? What was he agreeing to take upon himself if the covenant was broken? And what does that have to do with a hill outside Jerusalem 2,000 years later? Before we move past Genesis into what follows, if this architectural view is opening the text in a new way for you, subscribe before you scroll. The next 3 videos go into territory that no overview can fully cover. You will want to be there. Now, the 5th covenant. By the time Genesis ends, the family of Abraham is in Egypt. Hundreds of years pass. When God calls Moses at the burning bush, he identifies himself specifically as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He has not forgotten. The Mosaic covenant, the law, Sinai, the tabernacle, the priesthood, is often misread as a replacement of the Abrahamic covenant. Paul argues in Galatians that it is not. The law came 430 years after Abraham. He writes, "It cannot annul a covenant already confirmed." The question that video 5 will answer: if the law does not save and does not replace the Abrahamic promise, why was it given at all? The answer changes how you read every Old Testament law. The 6th covenant is not in Genesis. It is in 2 Samuel 7. But its roots run through Genesis, through the promise that a ruler would come from Judah, that the scepter would not depart. God promises David that his son will build a house for God and that his throne will be established forever. Solomon builds the temple. The temple is destroyed. The dynasty ends in Babylon. And yet the New Testament opens with the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David. The question that video 6 will answer: how does a covenant made with one king in one small nation about one dynasty become the hinge point of all human history? The 7th covenant is not in Genesis either. It is in Jeremiah 31, spoken to a people about to go into exile. The days are coming, God says, when I will make a new covenant. Not like the covenant I made with their fathers when I took them out of Egypt. This covenant is different in kind. The law will be written on hearts, not tablets. The forgiveness will be complete. God will know his people directly, without mediation. Jesus takes the cup at the Last Supper and says, "This is my blood of the new covenant." The question that video 7 will answer: if this is a new covenant, what happened to the old ones? Were they failures? Were they always pointing here? The answer is the architecture of everything. Lay these 7 covenants end to end, and you see something that cannot be accidental. Each one presupposes a breach the previous covenant could not fully repair. Each one narrows the focus from all creation to all humanity, to one family, to one nation, to one tribe, to one king, to one person, and then explodes outward to include all nations, all peoples, all of creation restored. A funnel, and then an explosion. God was not improvising. He was building. The blueprint was in place before the bricks were laid. What this series will answer, covenant by covenant, is not just what each agreement contained. It is what God was committed to, what He was willing to take on Himself, and why a book about ancient history is a book about the structure of the world you are living in right now. 7 videos, 7 covenants, 1 architectural project that has been running since Genesis 1 and is still running. Start with the first video, the Edenic Covenant, what the original agreement required, and what the second Adam came to accomplish when the first could not. If this overview opened Genesis in a new way, subscribe and leave a comment. Share it with someone who has wondered why the Old Testament matters. That is exactly the person this series is for. God bless you. And let's go deeper.